Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Dalet, and Mirz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Kuf Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. We pick up today 2 lines off the bottom of Kuf Tzadik Vav Amud Beis, Siman Shin Mem Hey in the middle of Sif Zayin. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanisunu Batzaru Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yirachem Aleihem V'yitzia mitzar l'rvacha me'afelu la'ira mishibud l'geula hashta b'agala v'zman kariv and emar amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Esther Fradel bas Chana Meshamer ben Esther Fradel Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha Rivka bas Shira Leah Chava Hadassah bas Serel Yeshua Levi ben Ahuva Malka Chana and Gila Shifra bas Ilan Udel. They should all have a refuah shalema b'Soshar Chole Yisrael. Okay, so we are learning Hilchas Erevin. We're starting to get into the thick over here of Hilchas Erevin, and the truth is that today's Sif, the rest of Sif Zayin that we're going to be learning today, is one of the Seifim in Hilchas Erevin that come up for discussion all of the time whenever people are dealing with Erevin. Famous Machlokes, the Chavetz Chaim and Rav Moshe Zechet Tzadik Levracha, both of them certainly. And without further ado, let's jump back into Sif Zayin. So Sif Zayin was introducing to us a Rishus Harabim. What constitutes a Rishus Harabim? We started Sif Zayin already in the previous year, and in the previous year, we mentioned 3 prerequisites for an area to be given the status of Rishus Harabim. Number 1, the Mechaber said at the beginning of Sif Zayin, he says they have to be Rechavim Sheish Esrei Amma. They have to be 16 Amas wide. 16 Amas wide, depending on the different Shitas, Be'erech 30 feet, could be a little bit less than 30 feet, a little bit more than 30 feet, but Be'erech 30 feet, 16 Amas, you need a width of 16 Amas to be considered a Rishus Harabim. Why do you need 16 Amas? You need 16 Amas because we learn out the requirements for Rishus Harabim from the Diglei Hamidbar, from the Machane that Klal Yisrael encamped in the Midbar when they were traveling in the Midbar, and we brought a raya that the roads of the Machane they were at least 16 Amas wide. So that was prerequisite number 1, a Rishus Harabim must be at least 16 Amas wide. Prerequisite number 2 was Einam Mekayrim, that they cannot be roofed over. If the area is roofed over, it cannot be a Rishus Harabim. Believe it or not, there are various Erevin shilas that come up where sometimes there is an eitzah to go ahead and roof that area over. If you could roof it over, it ceases to be a Rishus Harabim. The number 1 ramification of that is, if you could take away the status of Rishus Harabim, now you could put up what we call an Erev. Now you could enclose it using Tzuras HaPesach, and you could make an Erev. If it's a bona fide Rishus Harabim, you can't make an Erev. So sometimes there is an eitzah to roof over a problem area, and it will no longer be considered a Rishus Harabim. But in any case, that was prerequisite number 2. So number 1, minimum width 16 Amas. Number 2, it cannot be roofed over. If it's roofed over, it cannot be a Rishus Harabim. Rishus Harabim can't be roofed over. Number 3 was Ein Lehem Chayma. Rishus Harabim is not walled in. If the area is walled in, then it is not a Rishus Harabim. And now we pick up today with a caveat in that last prerequisite. So we just said, if it's walled in, it can't be a Rishus Harabim. Now the Mechaber is going to tell us that's not always true. Sometimes you could have a main street that is walled in, and yet it could still be considered a Rishus Harabim. Says the Mechaber, 2 lines off the bottom, a little bit past the middle of the line, Va'afilu yesh lohem chayma. Sometimes you could have a street and it is walled in. Now, what would be a prime example of that? You have a city, a walled city. So the entire city is walled in. And in that city, you have a main street. Now, that main street meets all the other requirements of being a Rishus Harabim. It's 16 Amas wide. It's not roofed over. So far, we could look at this main street and we would say, hey, this main street is a Rishus Harabim. But what seems to be taking away the status of Rishus Harabim is that it's located inside a walled city. So it is walled in. And you would think, okay, Ois Rishus Harabim, because it's walled in. Says the Mechaber, not so fast. Va'afilu yesh lahem chayma. Even if it is walled in, im heim mifulashim mishar l'shar. If this main street, if this main avenue runs in a straight line, clear across the city, so it's a walled city, and maybe on the north side of the city, there's a gate to go out of the city, and on the south side of the city, there's also a gate, and this main avenue runs straight from the north gate to the south gate. If you're standing at the north gate and you look through binoculars, you'll see clear out the south gate, and so too vice versa. So you have a main street, 16 amas wide, not roofed over, but it's in a walled city. But since it's mifulashim mishar l'shar, since this main avenue goes straight, clear across the city, from one gate to the other one, and in the parentheses it says here, ve'ein dal soisav nu'ulais balayla, and these gates remained open around the clock. Why do they have gates, right? It's the old joke. If 7-Eleven is open 24/7, 365 days a year, why are there locks on the door? So you'll ask me, it's a walled city, it has gates. You're telling me the gates are never closed. The gates are open all night, so why do they have gates? Kasha v'maisa. You'll have to ask the gatekeeper. But we have over here, says the Shulchan Aruch, if this main avenue goes clear across the city in a straight line, from gate to gate, and the gates are not closed at night, so this main thoroughfare is always opened as a main thoroughfare that could go clear across the city from gate to gate, have a Rishus Harabim. Then it's a Rishus Harabim, even though it's located in a walled city. Now, this comes from a Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin on Vav Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Yerushalayim, okay, Yerushalayim Ber HaKodesh, Il Mole Dal Soiseh Nin Olois, if not that the doors of Yerushalayim are closed at night, if you did hoitzah in the main street of Yerushalayim, it would be an Issa Daraisa of hoitzah. You would be chayiv, karban chatas, if you did hoitzah b'shoigig. Why? Because apparently this main street of Yerushalayim went clear across the city, from gate to gate, and therefore even Yerushalayim, even though Yerushalayim had a chayma, it was walled in, but it doesn't matter. Since it's mafulish, and the gates, if were it that the gates were never closed, if the gates would be opened all night, that street would have the status of Rishus Harabim, despite the fact that it has walls. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Going to Mishnah Berurah is Chaf, which is 4 lines off the bottom in the middle of the line. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Mefulashim Mishar L'Shar, and the Chavetz Chaim is very meduyik over here, very precise. He writes, Pirush, what does this mean? Mefulashim Mishar L'Shar, Pirush, Sha'arim Mechuvanim Zeh Keneged Zeh. The north gate is directly opposite the south gate. So you see what the Mishnah Berurah is saying. He's taking sides in Machlekesen over here. But the Chavetz Chaim is telling you, if this street curves, if this street makes turns, then even if it connects ultimately the north gate to the south gate, but it's not mefulashim mishar l'shar, it's not mechuvanim zeh keneged zeh, it's not that one gate is directly opposite the other gate, then it wouldn't be a Rishus Harabim. The requirement over here to make it a Rishus Harabim, despite the fact that it's in a walled city, is that it is muchuvin mishar l'shar. This is a straight line going from the north gate to the south gate, or from the east gate to the west gate. It's a straight line cutting clear across the city. And, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'yesh la'osay derech ha'mechuvin mishar l'shar kol din Rishus Harabim. And the Magen Avraham says, in order for this street to be considered a Rishus Harabim, it has to possess the other attributes of a Rishus Harabim. Namely, it has to be 16 amas wide, and it can't be Makura, it can't be roofed over. If it's not 16 amas wide, and it goes mefulish mishar l'shar, and the gates remain open 24/7, it's still not going to be a Rishus Harabim, because it's not 16 amas wide. If it's roofed over, it's not going to be a Rishus Harabim. it's roofed over. It can't be Rishus Harabim. So it has to have all the other prerequisites of Rishus Harabim. V'ayin b'biur halacha. Oiskon chaf aleph ve'ein dal soisav. In the parentheses here it says that it has to be that the gates are not closed at night. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ve'im delas achas dinelas balayla. Let's say they close one gate at night. They close the north gate. The north gate is on the bad side of town. There's a bad neighborhood right outside the gate on the north side. So on the north side, they close the gate, but they keep the south side open. So, Mishnah Berurah Siv Katan Vav. We'll have to discuss it later on over there. Over there, the Mishnah Berurah is going to bring down a shita in the Rishonim that says that if one gate is already closed at night, it can't be a Rishus Harabim. Nu'ulois says over here that it has to be that the gates are not closed. So the Chavetz Chaim is very medayik in the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Chavetz Chaim, lashon zeh mashma, from the language over here, it is very clearly implied that if the gates are not closed, even though they can be closed, there's beautiful, well-oiled hinges, doors on the gates, and the gates certainly could be closed. Factually, they're not closed. Well, it says here in the Shulchan Aruch, if the doors aren't closed, then it's a Rishus Harabim, right? So, the presence and the existence of doors that could be closed does not take off the designation of Rishus Harabim. In order to take off the designation of Rishus Harabim, the gates have to actually be closed. If the gates are closed, it's not a Rishus Harabim. But if the gates don't close at night, if they remain open, so then it's a Rishus Harabim. This is in accordance to the day of Rishona that we're going to have in Shin Samach Daled Sif Beis Ayin Sham. Now, before we go weiter, what's at work over here? So it seems that what's at work over here, as a matter of fact, I can read you a Rashi. There's a very nice Rashi over here. I quoted the Gemara in Eruvin on Vav Amud Aleph. So the Gemara is coming here from the streets of Yerushalayim. Says Rashi, Rishus Harabim Shalah, and that's, by the way, why I say that when the Mechaber says over here that Afilu Yesh Lehem Choyma, right? The Mechaber is busy talking about a street, whether a street is a Rishus Harabim or it's not a Rishus Harabim. So one of the prerequisites for it to be a Rishus Harabim is Ein Lehem Choyma. It doesn't have a wall. I said, and then he says, Va'afilu yesh lahem chayma, even if it does have a wall, that doesn't always take away the designation of Rishus Harabim. And the scenario that I gave was a main street in a walled city. Well, that's because that's what the Gemara in Eruvin is talking about. The Gemara in Eruvin is talking about Yerushalayim. It's talking about a street in a walled-in city like Yerushalayim. It's not talking about a street that has walls, mamish, alongside it. That could also be. I'm not saying that. But the scenario that we're coming from is the scenario of the Gemara in Eruvin, where we're talking about a city that has walls around it. So you would think everything is a Rishus HaYachid, right? Technically, everything is a Rishus HaYachid. Says the Shulchan Aruch, if you have a street in this city that goes straight across the city from shar to shar, and the gates never close, well, then it is going to be a Rishus Harabim. Now, why is that? Why? Why is it a Rishus Harabim? Says Rashi, Rishus Harabim shalom mechuved mishar l'shar u'mefulish. V'yesh ba drisas shishim ribu. You have 600,000 people traversing this area because it's a main city. V'rachov sheish esrei ama, and we'll get to that more, this question of shishim ribu. V'rachov sheish esrei ama, the street is 16 amas wide. V'ilmoli shenoil in dal seiseh b'chol laila. If not for the fact that they closed the gates every night, chayav and alei b'shabbos b'shum Rishus Harabim. The street would have the status of Rishus Harabim, and it would be an issa daraisa to transfer from Rishus HaYachid onto that street, or to carry dalan amas on that street. Aval ni'ilas telosois mishavia l'kechatzer shel Rabim. But the fact that they closed the gates at night makes it not a Rishus Harabim, it makes it a Chatzer Shel Rabim, which is a Carmelis. Uma'arvin is Kula, and therefore you can make an Erev. Now, the reason for this is because, again, when we try to decide whether an area is a Rishus Harabim or not, it has to be Doime L'Diglei Hamidbar. It has to be similar to the Machane. It has to be similar to the Machane of Klal Yisrael in the Midbar. Now, the main roads and the main thoroughfares of the Machane, they were mefulish, they were open to the rabbim, and they were open all day and all night, and they went clear through, and there were no gates. There were Anani covered, but there were no gates. So too over here. In order for this street to have the status of Rosh Hashanah, it has to be a wide open thoroughfare 24/7. If they're closing the gates at night, it's not anymore a wide open thoroughfare, and it is surrounded by a wall because the city is surrounded by a wall. Okay. Now we go to this, bombshell of a line in Shulchan Aruch that so many people are busy with whenever a discussion of Eruvin comes up. Says the Mechaber. So we have so far here, what are the requirements for a place to be considered a Rosh Hashanah? It has to be 16 amos wide. It can't be roofed over. No walls. Even if it has walls, if it's mefulish mishar l'shar, if it cuts clean across the city from gate to gate and the gates remain open at night, then it still could be a Rosh Hashanah. But now the Mechaber brings a yesh oimrim with one more requirement in order for an area to be able to be considered a Rosh Hashanah. Says the Mechaber, v'yesh oimrim shekol she'ein shishim ribu oivrim bay b'chol yom, as long as you do not have 600,000 people traversing an area on a daily basis, Einoi Rosh Hashanah, it cannot be considered a Rosh Hashanah. Now, once you hear the number Shishim Ribu, you're not going to ask me, well, what is this based on? You understand right away what it's based on. Again, it's based on the Diglei HaMidbar. It's based on the Machane. The Machane had at least 600,000 people in it every day. It had more than 600,000 people, which the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out. But the number that the Torah Dirshu uses all the time is Shishim Ribu, 600,000. The count of Klal Yisrael, so to speak. We only count people between the ages of so-and-so. We only count males. But whatever it is, the count that the Torah Dirshu gives for Klal Yisrael in the Midbar is always 600,000. So you want to know what you need in order to be Rosh Hashanah? There are certain physical requirements that you need of the place itself, right? It has to be 16 amos wide because the main streets in the Midbar were 16 amos wide. It can't be roofed over because the main streets in the Midbar were not considered to be roofed over. Anania covered, put that aside, but they weren't roofed over, right? Ein lehem chayma because they didn't have chaymais. But there was another thing. The Diglei HaMidbar had 600,000 people or more on a constant basis. So you want to know what you need to be a Rosh Hashanah? You need 600,000 people. That's a yesh oimrim. Yesh oimrim shekol she'ein shishim ribu. If you don't have 600,000 oivrim by b'chol yom, ain't a Rosh Hashanah. It's not a Rosh Hashanah. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Kan Chav Gimel. V'yesh oimrim shekol she'ein shishim ribu. Sfira lehu. This man Yomer holds the Gamlo Zebi in Adomya the Diglei Midbar Shahu Shishim Ribu. That for this requirement, you also need it to be similar to the Diglei Midbar, where there are always 600,000 people. Va'af Shahayasham Oid Erev Rav V'Noshim V'Taf. Why are you telling me 600,000? Make it 3 million. I mean, it's true you had 600,000 men above the age of 20, but you also had women, and you also had children, and you also had the Erev Rav that weren't counted. So you definitely had more than 600,000. So why is the number 600,000? It should be 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million. I don't know what it should be. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and he gets this from a Tosfos. Loi chashvinan elamashe nimtza kakasav beferish. Bakasav beferish. We take the number that the Torah Dirshu uses. And the truth is, it makes sense. Because otherwise, how on earth would we be able to put a geder to this? A halacha has to have a geder. We only have the geder that the Torah Dirshu gives us. What are we going to do? We're going to stop making up numbers? We don't have census reports from the times, we do have census reports, but the number used in the census report is 600,000. We don't have a census report taking into consideration the entire population, women and children and Erev Rav. The Torah Dirshu never gave it to us. So that's the biggest raya of all, that cannot be the geder that makes up a Rosh Hashanah. If that was the geder of what made up a Rosh Hashanah, the Torah Dirshu would have had to give it to us. And the Torah Dirshu doesn't. So we have to work with what the Torah Dirshu does give us, which is Shishim Ribu. Okay, so now, let's pause here for a second. What do we do with this Yesh Omrim? This Yesh Omrim is setting the bar for a Rosh Hashanah very high. before we get up to this Yesh Ibram, okay, so in order to be a Rishus Harabim, you have to be 16 amos wide. We have, in all of our major metropolitan areas, we have lots of streets that are 16 amos wide, especially at certain junctures, right? Even if you'll have a street that's not really 16 amos wide, once you start getting to intersections, the intersections usually are 16 amos wide. Now, there's another kula that we take into consideration, which is that we don't count the area where the cars park, because that's not a mokum lihiluch harabim. If anything, that would have a din of tzidei rishus harabim. Where the cars park, people don't go there. That's usually taken up by cars. Ask anybody who's circling 100 million times looking for parking in Borough Park, right? The place that the cars park is not a mokum lihiluch harabim. But even if we subtract out the place that the cars are parked, and even if we count out other things, there are a lot of streets that are 16 amos wide. For sure, by the intersections, they're 16 amos wide. So, l'chara, we have lots of Rishus Harabims. Now, once you have a Rishus Harabim, the biggest problem that that's going to make for us is that all of these eruvin that we make, all of our poles and strings and electric wires and lechis and everything else, you can't be ma'ariv a bona fide Rishus Harabim. If an area is a Rishus Harabim da'araisa, there's no such thing as making an erev. You can only make an erev on a carmelis. You can't make an erev on a Rishus Harabim da'araisa. So all your erevin go out the window if we're dealing with bona fide da'araisa Rishus Harabims. So why is it that we don't worry about this? Why is it that we don't have all of these streets being considered Rishus Harabim? It's because of this last requirement that the Shulchan Aruch gives. The Shulchan Aruch says, in order for a street to be considered a bona fide Rishus Harabim da'araisa, it has to be a Makom Hiluch 600,000 people. 600,000 people is a lot of people, Rabbi say. So in most small relatively smaller communities, the streets that we're dealing with are not a Makom Hiluch Shishim Ribu. Now, once you get into Manhattan, once you get into, big main cities, now you do have a problem. And this is why Rav Moshe Zechariah Berurah said you can't make an erev in Manhattan. He didn't speak about it directly, but according to him, you can't make an erev in Brooklyn. Why can't you make an erev? Because now you're dealing with streets that are 16 amos wide, and it is a Makom Hiluch Shishim Ribu. These are major cities that do have 600,000 people. The streets do serve 600,000 people. You get to Manhattan. Manhattan is mamish. The streets are mamish a grid, and the streets are mefulish from one side of the city to the other side of the city, right? You have the east side and the west side. You have streets in a grid that go clear across from the east side of Manhattan, clear across to the west side of Manhattan, and they are 16 amos wide, and they do serve Shishim Ribu. So over there, you have a real bona fide problem. You can't make an erev. But in the communities where we are making a Reuven, it is because we are relying on this sheet over here in the Shulchan Aruch that says in order for a street to be called a Rishus Harabim, it has to serve Shishim Ribu. Against that backdrop, let's take a look here at Mishnah Berurah's Chav Gimel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yesh Amar B'Shekol She'ein Shishim Ribu. Sfir Lahu they hold the Gamlo Zebi in a Domi the Diglei Bilbar Shayu Shishim Ribu. V'af Shal Yisham Oid Erev Rav Nasher V'Taf Lech Hashvin Elamat Shedim Tzavak Kasem Beferish Ule'inyan Halacha. What do we do halacha l'maisa? Now, here, what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, and what the Chavetz Chaim writes in the Bir Halacha, even in a tougher way, in a stronger way, you're going to see that really people who follow the Mishnah Berurah, who they give the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, the status of Pesach Akron, and they live by the word of the Chavetz Chaim, very hard to use contemporary eruvin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Inyan Halacha. Midas HaMechaber the Kosav De'azu Rak B'Shem Yesh Oimrim. How did the Mechaber write this? The Mechaber gave us 3 prerequisites for Rishus Harabim. He told us you need 16 amos. He told us it can't be roofed over. He told us no walls. Then he says Yesh Oimrim. There is a Yesh Oimrim that says that there's another requirement. The street has to be serving 600,000 people. But he only gives that to us as a Yesh Omrim. So says the Chavetz Chaim, follow the Klolei Psak. How do we normally understand the das of the Mechaber? Ulinyan halacha midas Mechaber the cause of day rak b'shem Yesh Omrim. Mashma de halacha le'svir le'kein. The clear indication from the Mechaber is that the Mechaber does not follow this Shita halacha l'maisa. He calls it a Yesh Omrim, but he doesn't take it as the Ikar Adin. When we come up, and therefore we wouldn't follow it. The Mechaber is not paskening that way. When we come up, nevertheless, says the Mishnah Berurah, in bonu kayach limchais biyad hasoimcher al deyazu. But if we find people that are using an eruv because they're soimich on this shita, and it's based on this shita that they say that they can make an eruv because the streets aren't a bona fide rishus harabim, all right, we can't object. We don't have the kayach to be able to object. Why? The deyazu gamken loy das yechidahi. It's this Yesh Omrim, while the Mechaber writes it Yesh Omrim, it sounds like it's a Deya Yechida. There's one opinion that way. No, it's not a Das Yachid. Kamosh Kasafti B'Bir Halacha. The Chavetz Chaim puts out the sheetus in this long Bir Halacha here. This is not a Das Yechida. V'chein Tzididu Kam Achronim. A lot of Achronim take this position. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, you want to know what the Chavetz Chaim would tell you? You want to know what the Mishnah Berurah's psak is? V'chol Baal Nefesh Yachmir La'atzmai. Anybody who's a Baal Nefesh, anybody who cares about his neshama, he's a Baal Nefesh. He knows that he has a Nefesh, and he's concerned with the welfare of his Nefesh. The Chol Baal Nefesh Yachmer La'atzmai, they should be Machmir. V'ayin b'simin shin samachtal b'Mishnah Berurah sivkat chesed b'bir halacha kan v'sham. Now, let's be clear, and we're going to go through part of this Bir Halacha. Let's be clear. When the Mishnah Berurah says Kol Baal Nefesh Yachmer La'atzmai, he means that a Baal Nefesh should not go, he should not be soimich, he should not rely on this Yesh Omrim of the Mechaber. And then you would look at our streets, and you would say, our streets, a lot of them, are Rishus Harabim. They're 16 amos wide, they're not roofed over, they're not walled in, so what are they? They're Rishus Harabim. If they're Rishus Harabim, they cannot be enclosed in an Erev, and you can't be matir hoitzah using an Erev. Mishnah Berurah, Baal Nefesh Yachmir La'atzmai. Let's do one more Mishnah Berurah, and then let's take a look at some Bir Halacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kan Chavdal B'chol Yom. When the Mechaber gives us this Yesh Omrim, he gives it to us in two pieces. He gives us two requirements. One is that in order for a street to be a Rishus Harabim, it has to serve Shishim Ribu. Shishim Ribu Oivrim Boi. But then he says another thing. B'chol Yom. It has to serve 600,000 people every day. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kal Chavdalad, Chipasti b'chol Rishonim, ha'imdim b'shitazu. Says the Mishnah Berurah, I looked through all of the Rishonim. And by the way, I'll give you a heads up. In the Bir Halacha, the Chavetz Chaim comes out with 12 Shitas Rishonim. 12 Rishonim that hold of this Kula. 12 Rishonim that say that in order for a street to be a Rishus Harabim Daraisa, a bona fide Rishus Harabim, it has to serve 600,000 people. So says the Mishnah, I looked through all the Rishonim that hold that way. Chipasti b'chol Rishonim ha'imdim b'shitazu v'lo niska b'divreim t'nai zeh. But I didn't find any one of them that says that it has to serve 600,000 people b'chol yom every day. Rak shiyu b'tzuyin sham shishim ribu. Only that it has to be in a place where there are 600,000 people. But it doesn't say that we have to put that in a pneumatic strip on the street and do a count and see that 600,000 people traverse it every day. And if we find out that on a holiday weekend when everybody's traveling and no one's left in the city, 600,000 people don't go there, okay, it's not a Rishus Harabim because it's not B'chol Yom. So they didn't find that. Okay, now, want to take a look here in the Bir Halacha. There's this very long Bir Halacha, Dibra Maschel, She'ein Shishim Ribu. Now, I'm going to say that about a third of the way through this Bir Halacha, I'll try to give you a better landmark. In my print of the Mishnah Berurah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines down in the wide lines of the Mishnah Berurah. Let me see if I can tell you where it is in the Dirshu print. In the Dirshu print, I found it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In the Dirshu print, it's 8 lines down in the Bir Halacha. The Chavetz Chaim says as follows: Va'ata, and now, Navai lehispainen oidois mashe kasvu hamagen Avram va'ataz. I want to discuss what I'm quoting from the Magen Avram and the Taz. The Roiv Paiskim Sviriluhu Kayeshaimer. The Magen Avram and the Taz make the statement that Roiv Paiskim hold like this Yeshayrim, that in order to be Rosh Hashanah Daraisa, it has to be servicing 600,000 people. Hine be'emes kifi mashe hetek apes Yosef bekitzin Nimrod says ikra ashitois. The truth is that when you take a look at the Beis Yosef, with the Beis Yosef in a rather quick way goes through the various shittas of the Rishonim, dimuhem sharak eluhem hacholkim bazeh. Mishnah Berurah, Chavetz Chaim really makes what's a pretty astounding statement. He says that the Magen Avram and the Taz, why did they make this statement that Roiv Paiskim hold like the Yeshayim? Says the Chavetz Chaim, it seems that it's because they looked at the Beis Yosef. And the Beis Yosef brings down the shittas of the Rishonim. And if you take a look at the way the Beis Yosef quotes the Rishonim, it seems that there's only a few Rishonim that go like this Yeshayim. So it sounds like Roiv HaPaiskim say like this Yesh. I'm sorry. It seems that there's only a few Rishonim that argue on the Yeshayim. But it sounds like most of the Rishonim hold, like the Yeshayim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, it seems that that's what the Magen Avram and the Taz saw. They looked at the Beis Yosef and they said, you have this Yeshayim. It sounds like most Rishonim hold of the Yeshayim. There's only a few Rishonim who are chaylik on it. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, I'm skipping the brackets. Aval kasher chipasnu dara zeba poiskim. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, when you look through the Paiskim, Matzanu oid harbe migdolei harishainim hamachmirim be'inyan zeh. I found a lot of Rishonim that are machmir against this Yeshayim. Okay. Mitkila achashev dasam akilin bazeh. Let's first go through those that are mekel and hold of the Yeshayim. Rishon lekulam hevi zeh b'shem balalachis gedolos. The Bahag. Okay. Let's skip the brackets. V'Rashi be'ervin davav amad aleph adaf nuntes. Save the Bahag and Rashi. Usmag 3. Usmak 4. V'Sefer HaTruma 5. V'Rabbeinu Meir 6. V'Rekeach 7. V'Taisus Perakama B'Meisha 8. V'Arosh 9. V'Arzarua 10. V'Atur 11. V'Rabbeinu Yerucham 12. So says the Bir Halacha, I went through and I found 12 Rishonim that hold like this Yeshayim. You want to be a bona fide Rosh Hashanah, has to be serving 600,000 people. Okay, 12 Rishonim. And these are all Ikrei Rishonim, right? Very well-known names. Okay, however, L'umaseh, opposite this, Yesh harbe shesovrin. There are many Rishonim that hold. Sherishus harabim hu min HaTorah, kisharabim boikim abakam hazeh imu mufulish v'loy bein shisharibu. He says, L'dich Yisa, there are a lot of Rishonim that hold. You don't need 600,000 people. It has to be a makom that the rabbim are boikim boy. It has to be a place that's made lehiluch harabim. Definitely has to be a place, a public thoroughfare. But you don't need 600,000 people. Okay, who are these Rishonim, and how many are there? Let's see. Halohema Harambam 1, Harabbeinu Tam 2, Haramban 3, Harashba 4, Haritva 5, Harava Magid, the Magid Mishnah 6, Haran 7, Hagos Mordechai 8, Harashbam 9. One second. Rebbe Lezer Mimitz 10. Varivosh 11, Vahameiri 12. Guess what? It's 12 against 12. And these 12, it happens to be certainly the beginning of the list. It sounds like you're sitting in a Mismadrash and you're sitting right next to the shelf with the Rishonim on it. Right? I mean, who do you have over here? The Rambam, the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva, the Magid Mishnah, the Ran, the Mordechai, Tosfos, the Meiri. I mean, so says the Chavetz Chaim, the Magen Avraham and the Taz come along, and they sound like they learned the Beis Yosef, and after they learned the Beis Yosef, they said, oh, you have a Yesh Omrim, but and it sounds like most Rishonim, most Poskim hold like the Yesh Omrim. It sounds like there's a few Rishonim that are chaylik on the Yesh Omrim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, really? It's 12 against 12. All Ikrei Rishonim, and it's mamish 12 against 12. Kulam Svirlahu Deloy Be'in and Shishim Ribu. These all hold that you don't need 600,000. Now I'm going to skip again. I'm going to skip pretty far down. Now I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4 lines off the bottom, where the Chavetz Chaim says, Mikol zeh muchach. From all of the above, it is proven and it is clear. Sheyesh lahachmir kedeya harishona. It is the position of the Chavetz Chaim, and this is a Mishnah Berurah here. It's the position of the Chavetz Chaim that you should be machmir against this Yesh Omer. You should be machmir like the Deya Rishona, that you do not need 600,000 to be a real Rishos HaRabim. Skipping a little further, but like he said in the Mishnah Berurah, we cannot object against those that are makel. I mean, they're also coming from a very impressive list of 12 Rishonim. The Bahag, Rashi, so you can't object to people that are makel. Aval. Kol Yerei Shamayim bevada yesh lahachmir la'atzmai. Says the Chavetz Chaim, a Yerei Shamayim should be machmir. Tibizmanenu yesh gamken rishos harabim in HaTorah. You should be about a Yerei Shamayim, or like you said in the Mishnah Berurah, about nefesh, should be machmir that we do have streets that are real bona fide midaraisa rishos harabims. Umemela ein lismaich al erev shel tzuras haPesach. And based on that, you would not be able to rely on contemporary eruvin that are made with a combination of tzuras haPesachs. The be'ina dafka dlosos, because for that you need doors. A tzuras haPesach is not enough. What does it mean you need doors? It means that you need to cut the street off. You need to be able to shut the street down with doors to make it ois rishos harabim. You have to put up fences. There are certain areas, I've seen this in Connecticut. Truth is, they do it in Borough Park nowadays by bus dismissal. They put up fences and they close up a street. Okay, you have a street that's 16 amos wide and it's not roofed over and it's not walled in, so it's a Rishus Harabim, but then you put up fences and you shut it down, now it's not a Rishus Harabim anymore, right? It's just not. The Rabbim can't go through. It's shut down with doors. So Rabbi say, it's the opinion of the Chavetz Chaim, and this is a Mishnah Berurah here, it's the opinion of the Chavetz Chaim that a Baal Nefesh has to be machmer. Having said that, the well-known Shita of Rav Moshe's was not that way. And Rav Moshe, this Shita of Rav Moshe is always very, very fascinating to me. The Shita of Rav Moshe basically is Puk Chazim Mayam Dabar. The Rosh Hashanah writes, he says, what are you talking about? This has been the minig miyamim kadmoinim. I mean, all over Europe, this is what they did. They relied on an Erev, and the Erev encompassed streets that were 16 amos wide, that were not roofed over, that were not walled in. So how could they make an Erev? They made an Erev because it's a shtetl, and it doesn't serve Shishim Ribu, and since it doesn't serve Shishim Ribu, it's not considered a Rishus Harabim. So all the Erevin, all over Europe, and one of the things he says, what do you think they did with the cholent? How did they have cholent, right? What's probably mean? Put it on the crock pot, put it on the hot plate, you put it on the blech with the gas stove. They didn't have that. It's funny, because I remember reading about this even, the famous book, or some people would call it a Musa Sefer, All for the Boss, where Ruchama Shane, who wrote the book about her father, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Herman, Tzaddik Levracha, she says that when she went with her husband to Mir in Poland, what did they do with the cholent on Shabbos? They couldn't keep a fire going in their oven in their house all Shabbos long, but there was a baker. The bakery had an oven that was kept hot all Shabbos. So all of the balabostas, what did they do? They all took their cholents, They all brought their cholent to the bakery and put it into the bakery oven. And Shabbos morning, in time for the Suda, they went to the bakery to go get the cholent and bring the cholent home. Rabbi said, how'd they do that? They did that because they had an Erev. That's how they did it. And they did that even though they had streets that were 16 amos wide, and they weren't roofed over, and they weren't walled in. So how'd they make an Erev? Because it's a shtetl. It doesn't serve Shishim Ribu. So it's not a Rishus Harabim. So Rav Moshe writes, this was always the minig. We always relied on this Yesh Omrim. And therefore he says, halacha lamaisa, there's absolutely no reason not to be soimech on this Yesh Omrim. So the Chavetz Chaim says, Bal Nefesh, you should be machmer. Okay, that is the Chavetz Chaim's position. Like I said earlier, people who are oduk to the Piskei Mishnah Berurah, people who follow the Mishnah Berurah on everything, very hard to see that they should be able to go rely on a contemporary Erev. Bal Nefesh Yachmir, Yerei Shamayim, Yachmir La'atzmai. The psak of Rav Moshe was that we could rely on this psak, on this Yesh Omrim, that the Shulchan Aruch brings, that it's not a real Rishus Harabim unless it serves Shishim Ribu. Now, having said that, Rav Moshe also said that, I don't remember, I didn't look it up just now, I don't remember the exact phraseology that he uses in the Igris. He says Talmidei Chachamim, or he says Rabbanim, I'm not sure. People that are being looked to for Piskei Halacha, etc., that maybe they should not, maybe they should taka be machmer. Why? Because people look up to them as the picture of halacha, in order so that their word should be makubal. People have to see that they're nizar. Maybe they shouldn't use such an erev. But for the Hamoin Am, he says there's really no reason not to be saimech on this Yesh Omrim. Now, but nobody should walk away from this shir only 3 pages in to Chelik Daled and somehow misapply what I'm saying and say that Rav Moshe was makel when it comes to Erev. And oh yeah, I remember hearing this shir from Rabbi Weiss. Oh yeah, Rav Moshe is makel, so maybe you could make an Erev in big cities. No, that's a different shaila. The shaila of making an Erev, let's say in Manhattan, making an Erev in Brooklyn is a very different shaila. Over there you do have main streets that serve Shishim Ribu. Right? What? The streets of Manhattan don't serve 600,000 people? They certainly do. Main thoroughfares in Brooklyn don't serve 600,000 people? They certainly do. So over there you have a different shiloh. Over there the machlokes of whether or not, the machlokes of poskim in these areas, whether you could have an erev or not, involves other areas of halacha, other questions that we're not dealing with in today's shir. I'm coming in today's shir just this question. This requirement, in order for a street to be considered a Rishus Harabim, does it have to serve Shishim Ribu or not? You have a Yesh Omrim that says it has to serve Shishim Ribu. The Mishnah Berurah wants a Bal Nefesh to be machmer, not like this Yesh Omrim, because 12 on 12. Isurei Shabbos, Dvar Ma'odim Ne'Merumei Shalaylam. So Bal Nefesh should be machmer. Rav Moshe comes along and Rav Moshe says, Doirei Doiris, we made Erevin. In towns. You can't turn around and say, oh, we have to be machmer against this Yesh Omrim. Okay? We're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua Sefuros Parnasim Shaduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu Amen. Be well.